Welcome to another episode of the Para Cave podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Para Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Para Cave podcast, and actually a new season of the Para Cave podcast. Welcome to 2025, looking to have some fun in 2025, looking to have some more interviews with former players, coaches, administrators, fans of the game, the greatest game of all, rugby league. Cannot wait to do those. Also, we will have the tipping podcast come back this year as well, and if you haven't already, please join the tipping competition that the Para Cave podcast is running, all thanks to Assure Strata Reports. So give them a follow on Instagram, and also myself as well if you're not following. And they are sponsoring the podcast. They're sponsoring the tipping podcast. So if you need any more information on that, just have a look at the Para Cave podcast on Instagram, and I think it's in the bio there, but also you can send me a message and I'll send you the link to join up for that one. But please follow Assure Strata Reports as well. They welcome aboard as a sponsor of the Para Cave podcast this year, and in particular the tipping competition as well. So I really appreciate their support. Looking to do some game day preview podcasts throughout the week, and also some game day review podcasts during the week as well. So probably looking to do about 3 to 5 maybe podcasts a week. So really looking forward to getting into it for another season. I really thank you for your support in 2024. It was a great year that the Para Cave podcast had. I really enjoyed doing it, and gained some new followers and also some new listeners as well. So I really appreciate that one. But yeah, I just appreciate everyone following me and listening to the podcast. I hope you really enjoy it. Looking to do some more merchandise this year. I haven't finalised anything at the moment, but potentially looking to do some of that throughout the year as well. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you to those that have purchased merchandise in the past. I really appreciate that one as well. So look, this episode is I guess you could say the first episode of the season. This is the interview-based series. I will have some season previews of the Parramatta Eels coming up as well. I've recorded one with Mr. Chris Ricketts, who came to the Para Cave and did a interview about a preview of the Parramatta Eels. I'm looking to get a few more and put them together and get them out for the season that is only just around the corner. I think it's about 30 days or something close to that anyway, now that the Australian Open tennis is finished and it is the end of January. It is full steam ahead for the All-Stars weekend, which is in a couple of weeks' time, and then obviously the trial games, the pre-season challenge, and then the season proper kicks off in Vegas in round, well, I guess they call that round 0, don't they? But it is round 1, and I think that is on March 2. So look, rugby league proper is not that far away. So look, this is the interview, and this interview I have done with Mr. Lee Addison. Now, you probably don't know that name, but if you follow Rugby League Coach on Instagram, all one word, you will see who I am talking about. Now, he has had over 25 years experience coaching rugby league, has also coached at a couple of NRL teams, which he talks about, has also coached at a couple of World Cup, Rugby League World Cups as well. So he really knows the game. He is just about to bring out a rugby league coaching book called Rugby League Coach. All his details will be in the bio of this podcast, but also on his Instagram page as well, Rugby League Coach. So give him a follow as well. especially if you're in the interest of getting any coaching done or listening to his podcast as well, which is on Apple and Spotify as well. But he has some great resources there, basically coaching knowledge from over the years, coach mentoring, seminars, online resources. So he has it all there and has some very interesting stories in this podcast chat that I had with him. Now, this was recorded a few weeks ago, and it will be split up into 2 parts as well. So this will come out on Monday, and then probably a couple of days later it will come out. Probably early on this year, whilst it's January, February, it'll probably be on a Wednesday, and then on a Friday the second part will come out as well. Give you a chance to listen to the first part, or listen to the first part and not having to listen to an hour and a half all at once. So I think that might be a little bit easier for yourselves. I do know that sometimes for myself, I do find that a little bit easier to listen to podcasts that way. So I did that late last year with some of the interviews that I did, and I think that was pretty successful. So I will do that again this year, especially for the longer versions of interviews. We'll just see how we go. But this is the first part. So I really hope you enjoyed this chat, and the second part will be out in a couple of days. And thank you once again, Mr. Lee Addison, the Rugby League coach, for coming on and having a chat. And it was really interesting. And as Hindy says,
get a beer, coffee, whatever you want.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy. And let's get straight into it. And today on the podcast, got a very special guest, one who has been involved in rugby league for a very, very long time, especially in the coaching ranks. Over 25 years experience in coaching, has coached at 2 Rugby League World Cups, also has coached 2 NRL teams, and many NRL players. Welcome to the Para Cave podcast, Mr. Lee Addison, or better known as the Rugby League Coach.
How are you doing? I don't know if I'm a special guest.
Why is that?
Some of the names you've had on this podcast, I'm just a guest.
No, they're all special guests to myself, to be honest, and people that I love talking to rugby league about. So thank you very much for joining me today. Born in England, what was life like growing up as a young kid in England?
We have tough paper rounds in England. An 18-year-old in England always looks like older than an 18-year-old in Australia. I think life is obviously tougher. I grew up in somewhere that would make some of the toughest areas in Sydney look like paradise, quite frankly.
Okay.
I remember once I went to the shops, I decided to put my Reebok shell suit on the washing line. I'd just washed it. Went to the shops around the corner, 5 minutes, got back and it had gone. Stuff like that. I rarely had cars that didn't get attacked or, my stepdad, my dad, etc. Somebody's always had a crack at the car. So,
Tough.
Tough, but good as well, So
for sure. When did then rugby league come into your life?
Well, like everything with me that has been significant, it tends to be an accident.
Okay.
So I always grew up wanting to be in goal for Manchester City. And it's quite funny, just under a decade ago, I was in Ipswich in Queensland driving along the road, and on the radio it said Manchester City have signed Addison, the goalkeeper Addison. And I just thought it must have been a Kiwi commentator and that I'd finally got the Guernsey at age 30-something as I would have been, but no, it was the Brazilian Addison. So I always wanted to be a goalkeeper at Manchester City or somewhere, and definitely not United. And one morning, my friend Russell from school, for some reason, knocked on my door early. And for some reason, I'd also woken up early. I was 13 years old. And we'd said, what can we do? We might as well just go to school. And I went to school, and some lads were playing touch and pass, so touch football. And they said, come and try it with us. And I did.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, on a concrete yard. And they said, come and watch our grand final next week or whenever it was. And what blew me away, because I had no knowledge of this rugby league world, what blew me away was that their local grand final was played at the professional ground.
Okay. Yeah.
Which in rugby league is quite a common thing.
Yeah.
In football, in soccer, only the elite get to play at the big grounds.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So in rugby league, I'm thinking, I'm playing on, they're playing on the ground of my heroes that I go and watch. I thought, I want a piece of this.
Yeah, okay.
So the following year, I played my first game. I was quite big at the time, quite tall, so nobody wanted to tackle me, so I did okay. My second game, I scored a hat-trick. I thought, this will do me.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that's how I got involved. And then not long after that, my dad took me to the Rugby League World Cup final. That was in 1992. I don't know if you're old enough, but Great Britain did really well in that game, and it was only one missed tackle on Steve Renouf that separated the teams. And I love the atmosphere, and I love the pageantry around it. And I thought, this is the sport for me, and I fell in love. And
then obviously you continued to play, and were you good at any good? What was the peak?
I got into an England under-18 squad eventually. Okay. It didn't take me long to get into rep football, but I did. I've constantly been played with a left knee that I still struggle with to this day, and that kept holding me back occasionally. Certainly, I'm not sitting here saying I would have been the next Ryan Matterson, but it did impact me somewhat, and I was carrying it quite a bit. But I got into an England under-18 squad. I played for Great Britain students, England students, so on and so forth. Signed some basic contracts at professional clubs as well. So I did okay. And a lot of the habits that I formed then, I'm still using now in my mid-40s as I approach my peak, obviously. The training habits, the some of the dietary habits that I probably need to refine a bit more. But I played. I loved it. I also really enjoyed going to watch the game. So my dad used to take me with his friends to Salford at weekends. So I'd play Sunday morning, go and watch Salford, travel the northern end of the country to watch the games as well. So it was Manchester City on a Saturday and Salford on a Sunday.
Nice. I'm
not sure it works like that anymore. The fixtures are all over the show now due to TV. But yeah, that's how it happened. And when I think back, I really loved it. I could have played cricket to a higher level too.
Yeah.
So at 15, I basically made a choice. With hindsight, sometimes I wish I'd have gone down the cricket avenue.
Yeah.
Particularly with the advent of 2020 and whatnot, when you can get 200 grand for about 3 weeks' work.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. And I had an ability to hit the ball. It's funny, as a coach, I didn't take very well to coaching when I was a player. And I just wanted free rein. And when I played with a free rein, I was okay. Not bad wicket-keeper batsman, but rugby league was my love, and I went down that avenue. So you can't wind back the clock. Here I am.
No, that's it. That's for sure. Well, with that, as you mentioned before, the bad knee, is that when the sort of coaching came into play?
Not at all. It happened by accident.
Okay.
Yeah. So for 30 odd years, I've had to manage my left knee. Right. So I still manage it. I woke up this morning and went, oh, my left knee. So
okay, yeah.
You just get to a point where it's part of your life. And coaching happened by accident because in my third year at university, I'd actually got a job in the administration office at Wigan Warriors.
Okay.
I started at Salford Reds part-time, and then Wigan Warriors came in and said, we'll give you a full-time job when you leave uni. So I thought, I'm not going to risk any of this. I'll not play for a year. I'd been in England students, Great Britain students and whatnot, but I'll just won't play this year, make sure I get this job, and then I can worry about playing. Because I was also smart enough to realise that if I wanted to play professionally, I would have had to make a lot of sacrifices further and probably wasn't going to play Super League. So, and what happens at, I was going to say at some of the lower clubs, but it used to happen in the Super League club. Sometimes you'd play a couple of games and it'd take you 3 months to get paid.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah. So this was just this whole ecosystem of ploughing through crap all the time. So I thought I'll have a year off the game, focus on my studies. I had a nice girlfriend there. She was keeping me on track. She didn't want to stop me playing the game, but I just decided, I had everything I needed. I was working part-time as well. And I walked past so in England, we have something called Freshers' Fairs for universities where you walk past stalls and they say, come and play volleyball. Come and play
rugby. Yeah. Try and encourage you to get into it. Yeah.
I used to walk past the rugby union one and say words to the effect. Every year, for the 3 years, it'd be words to the effect of I'd rather die or something a bit more, or you're all soft or something like that. Yeah. But friendly banter. And the rugby league lads were there and said, sign up, Lee, sign up. I went, no, I'm having a year off. I got this, got that. I didn't want to go into Salford where I was at the time in the admin offices part-time with black eyes or whatever. And then when I made it clear that I wasn't going to play, one of the lads said, why don't you coach us then? We haven't got a coach. I said, what the insert expletive would I do that for?
Yeah.
And they said, and this is how it works with me, mate. They said, well, when you took a few sessions last year, Lee, they were really good. So what happened the year before? I was the captain. And the coach that we had, a very experienced coach, had a really bad car accident and left us without a coach in the middle of the year. I mean, he had a very good, valid reason, obviously. And I just stepped in and coached some sessions as the captain. So this fella said the sessions were really good. I was like, oh, do you think so? And I said, I'll do one session on Monday and then we'll work it out from there. And then you'll have to find someone. And I think on average, I've done 3 sessions a week since then, every week. So when you average it all out, that's how it happened. And I really sort of enjoyed the idea of having a concept in my head, putting it into a plan, getting the players to do it, the players enjoying it, and then moving forward as well, the strategy of a game. We will beat these by doing this. And then, oh, shit, it works. At 19, 20 years old, to be doing that was a big thing. So, the common thought was at that age I should still be playing, and the forces were beckoning me in that way. I was trying to do a little bit of that, but nothing major. But I had this job as well at Wigan, and I was enjoying that. So, yeah, I did that bit of coaching for a year, and then I was just sort of waiting to see where it took me for a while.
And then after that year, where did it take you, like in terms of coaching?
I spent a year just studying the game.
Okay.
So when I was at Wigan, 2001, Matthew Johns was at Wigan, Steve Renoff, David Ferner, Brett Dallas, Craig Smith, the old front rower. We had some real good players, plus the best English ones as well.
Yep.
May or may not be familiar with your Terry Newtons, your Terry O'Connors, etc. Andy Farrell. And so I had a really good team to monitor. And I made a point of having a year where I just studied the game, because I thought, if I am going to coach, I don't want to get a point where I've run out of ideas. And because I was involved in the student game, I got tapped on the shoulder to coach a regional side at a gala weekend.
Okay.
And this was not long after I'd done my sort of year of studying Wigan, if you like, and watching their little intricacies, but also developing my own thoughts of the game, watching as much NRL on Saturday and Sunday morning as I could and whatnot. And I coached this regional side and put into place everything that I decided to think about, which was a different way of playing football. I didn't want to be the same as everyone else. I wanted to see if I could come up with something new. So I thought I'll try it in this tournament.
Okay, yeah.
And basically what happened was my old coach from Great Britain Students was still the Great Britain Students performance director and everything else. And he watched my team and was really impressed by what he saw. Started to talk to me about coaching, this, that, and the other. At the same time, the England students coach, my old England students coach, he asked me and another guy called Matt to be assistants to England students because we were former internationals, to Richard Agar, who is now the assistant coach at the Warriors, ex-Leeds Rhinos, Hull FC, blah, 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 blah.
Okay, wow.
And I remember sat in this pub meeting him, chatting about the plans, and the idea was that Richard Agar would be the coach for 5 years and then he'd pass down to one of us. So I've got me and this guy, Matt, and I'm thinking, which one of us is going to be the head coach, which one's going to be the assistant?
Bit of competition.
Yeah. But remember, I was in administration as well, and administration paid the bills. Coaching paid jack shit.
Yeah.
So administration paid the bills. And there was a big admin job going in the Student Rugby League. You were basically the head of Student Rugby League. And guess who went for that job and got interviewed? Me and Matt.
Okay.
So literally, right at that point, and I think we're talking 2002-ish now, it was a choice that I was leaving with the universe, with the interviewers. Like, if you pick me as an administrator, I'm going to go down the administration route, and one day I want to be the CEO of the RFL.
Okay. Yeah. And then
If you pick me as a coach, if you don't, I'm going to be a coach, and I'm going to be the best coach ever. All right? That's literally what I was thinking.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't get the job. And Matt got the job. So what happened was I was the only assistant left with Richard Agar for the England students. And we were playing Scotland in a few weeks. And then Richard Agar got some job in the professional game. Featherstone assistant or something. It's almost like he couldn't wait to jump back into the professional game. So it was me left with the England students. And John Kane, my old England student coach, was there. And his first instinct was, don't worry, Lee, I'll look after you, blah, 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 blah. But you've got a coach aside. You could tell he wanted me to do all the job. But after no time at all, he was just leaving me to it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Must have had confidence then.
Yeah. I'm 20-odd years old, early 20s. Anyway, we won. And then we went on a tour of Germany where we played the British services over there, and we won over there too. A few months later, we played the New Zealand Army, and England students by then had never beaten Antipodean opposition, let alone armed services. And the New Zealand Army were playing all the armed services in England and absolutely flogging them, right? They went through the Navy, the Air Force, and then they were going to play 2 tests against the British Army. They played the first test against the British Army and flogged them. And then they came to play little old England students. Well, we won. And not only that, we won with a really patient game plan. We were half their size, and I worked out a game plan. We're just going to keep playing around, make them chase us, push the ball a bit wider here, push the ball a bit wider there, sneak down the short side there, yada, yada, yada. I think the game was 70 minutes. After 60 minutes, we were 18-4 down or something, and I was starting to doubt that this was going to come good, but the lads were digging in, they were defending well, etc., etc. And then it's just like the juice ran out of the New Zealand Army, and we just came over them at the end. And it was the validation of that game plan, the method, and everything else. I mean, we partied like that night like there was something else. Like, one of the lads had a pub really close, his family, so we stayed there, and the local journos got into it as well. I remember doing a radio interview in the morning, and I was a bit
interesting.
I was a bit under the weather. Brian Carney was at Wigan, and even he'd heard about it, rang me, said, bloody hell, brilliant, unbelievable you did that. It just made some waves. So then the Great Britain students coach, Vinny, said, right, you're coming with me to Australia for the students tour. for the great, and it went from there. I thought,
Okay.
yeah, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
A couple of months after the tour to Australia, I ended up in Russia with the England 21s. I thought, yeah, this will do, mate.
Yeah, okay.
And that's how it happened. And again, just an accident story, like.
It's a pretty remarkable rise in the coaching ranks to do it like that. I mean,
I think the student game was obviously primed for that.
okay,
Because
yeah.
they wanted students. It's a bit like if you're an ex-para player and you happen to show a little bit of coaching now, so they'll probably be keen to promote you rather than somebody who's an outsider. That's human nature, I think. So.
Yeah, it is a little bit, definitely, for sure. Well, the coaching journey led you to 2 World Cups, one for Ireland and one for the USA. What were those experiences like?
Well,
Coaching
I should probably keep going chronologically. I did 4 or 5 years in England, and don't know if you remember David Waite, the old St George Illawarra and Newcastle coach. Well, he came and was the performance director of British Rugby League and head coach of Great Britain, and at the same time, Sport England put in a load of funding into rugby league, and that's why most sports ended up winning gold medals at the 2012 Olympics because of this initiative. Don't take me down that rabbit hole of why rugby league hasn't, right? And so back then there was all these big camps in the RFL in England, and I was coaching a lot of the best kids in England all the time. And all the Burgess boys came through at that time, so I've been in contact with those. And back then I was promoted within that, so I ended up being the Northwest head coach and whatnot, which is a big thing. And I was also one of 12 coaches to get invited, only 12 to be fast-tracked and this, that and the other.
Wow.
But something was nagging away at me inside that it just felt that there weren't enough open opportunities at the top. Some people were in them for too long. So I decided to chance my arm in Australia for a year or two. 18 years later, I'm still sat here. And Ireland, when I was at Manly Sea Eagles, Ireland ended up being in camp at Manly's training ground. And I get a phone call from the assistant coach. He said, I'm just next to a couple of people who might know who you are. And it was one of my best mates, Terry O'Connor. So I said, I'll be around in 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
I ended up doing some video analysis and whatnot for them and just assisting and everything else. So that was that. So to your question, the World Cup, there were some interesting characters in that team. Some very good British players. There was a certain Ryan Tandy in that squad.
Ah, yes.
Yes. I'm trying to think of Australia. I think Pat Richards was in it.
Yeah, I was just about to say, was Pat in that side?
Yeah.
Or was he in the earlier one?
And I think one thing that continues to happen in Australian rugby league, and I feel qualified to say this, there's definitely an arrogance. Even I've become a bit arrogant about the strength of Australian over British.
Okay, yeah.
And there's nothing that winds a Brit up more than that. And I think these Irish lads just played above themselves for a couple of games, while from memory it was Samoa and Cook Islands. Lost to the Cook Islands in the first game, but played really well. But the second game was Samoa, and if they could beat them by a certain amount of points, they went through to the quarterfinals. Well, obviously, if you think where Samoa have got to now, to beat Samoa at that time would have been huge. Yeah. So the boys were really fired up for it. The pre-match motivation, I was involved in that quite heavily, put together a motivational video and whatnot. And we won. And we were in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So that was a good experience. When I look back at that, I was very young still, so still learning the ropes of how you should behave and around that. There was this confliction in me. I wanted to party a little bit still and coach, but so there's some, some things I'd like to take back about how I conducted myself. Not I didn't do anything illegal or just silly, and but we had a great time, and a couple of those people have become great friends, and and it was a good experience. And again, accidental. Terry rang me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was sat on the sofa watching The Block or something or whatever. I don't know what I was watching. So, yeah.
Who then from America accidentally called you to get involved with them?
This is even more. So I was at Manly Sea Eagles, and I got tapped on the shoulder by somebody at Penrith. So my ex-trainer, Adam Hartigan, went over to Penrith. Adam Hartigan is now the general manager of football at the Bulldogs and used to be at the West Tigers.
Okay.
And he said to Penrith, you probably need to get this coach over who's at Manly. So I got tapped on the shoulder, and obviously when you get tapped on the shoulder, you know. And I went for an interview with them. It was Matthew Elliott, somebody from the Junior League, and Jim Jones, who you will have read about. He was on the interview. Anyway, I interviewed well. Matthew Elliott gave me his phone number. He said, I want you to keep in touch with me, which is quite a good indicator that this is going well.
Definitely.
It turned out that Elliott went to his CEO and said, can I have some money for a third NRL assistant? I found one. And the CEO told him where to shove it. But I'm leaving there fully expecting to get a gig at Penrith. I got a phone call a couple of days later. Sorry, Lee, you didn't get the job. And it was like, I'm sorry, Lee, but you didn't get the job.
Okay.
I said, any feedback on the interview? They went, no, you interviewed brilliantly. I thought, this is a bit weird.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
anyway, it's politics. I'm not going to give any oxygen to the people who were politically against having an Englishman coaching at their club.
Okay. That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And it was somebody not at the club. It was somebody in the district who was powerful. And I said, okay, no problem. I'm thinking. So I thought, best, I'm still at Manly then. Anyway, Manly played a development squad gala day somewhere. I took this development squad, and Penrith and other clubs were there, and I saw two of the three who interviewed me.
Yeah.
I'd already called Matthew Elliott, and he hinted that politics were at play and just to keep in touch. And these two were there, and I said, any feedback on the interview, lads? They were like, no, you went absolutely greatly. I'm saying, well, why didn't I get the job then? And they sort of danced around it. And I just blurted it out. I said, well, why don't I take the Western Sydney Academy of Sport side for a year? And then I'm in the system, and then you can just move me up.
Okay.
And Jim Jones sort of looked at me and went, really? I went, yeah, I'll do it. I'll prove to you. Prove to all of you. Western Sydney Academy, as you will know, every year, I don't know if it still happens, but half of Penrith Panthers side and half of Parramatta's side come and make up the 20-man squad. So because both areas are so strong, the top 20 in Penrith get picked for Penrith, and then player 21 to 31 or whatever get picked, and same in Parramatta. Is that still happening? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure if that is still happening. I'll have to find
Anyway,
it
so
out.
this is what happened. So then I was in Penrith. I was part of Penrith all of a sudden. And I came up with this plan for them and coach that year. But because I was in Penrith, I got back in touch with Matt Elliott and said, this is what's happened. He said, right, come summer training with us then.
Okay. Yeah.
So I trained with the NRL squad that year as a coach. Like, I just hung around. Occasionally, Matt Elliott would throw me into games if the numbers were skew with. And just had a great summer, rubbing shoulders with Matthew Elliott, Steve George-Arliss, Snoopy Collins, Carl Jennings, Brad Fittler was around a fair bit then, Greg Alexander, Craig Gower, because they were Penrith boys.
Yep.
They were helping where they could. And so, yeah, it was just a great, great experience. The CEO of the Western Sydney Academy of Sport was, again, an accident, right? not him being the CEO is an accident. This is an accident.
Yeah.
The CEO of the Western Sydney Academy of Sport was one of 4 on a disgruntled parents committee that included 2 parents and 2 people, one from West Tigers and one from Canterbury Bulldogs, about the rugby league direction at St Gregory's College in Campbelltown, which you will be familiar with, being famous. A very big rugby league school.
Very famous.
And one day in August 2009, I know this because I've been looking back at it for my project that I've been doing, Josh Massoud wrote an article that got on the back page of the Daily Telegraph saying rugby league's in trouble at Greg's, blah, 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 and all hell broke loose. And I gets a call from a lady who was my friend at the New South Wales Rugby League. And she goes, Lee, there's a job at St Gregory's College. They want a teacher who's a coach. And there's only one name being mentioned.
Yours.
Mine. And so I went for the interview, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't have a clue what St Gregory's was. And I spoke to a couple of people. I went, Lee, this is huge, this is huge, this is huge. And I went for the interview with the boss and the committee, and they all said to me, Lee, it'll take you 3 years to build this into a rugby league thing again. I went, okay. And then the boss took me in on his own for a little chat afterwards, and he repeated that. And I said, well, I don't know what made me say this. I said, well, you've never been coached by Lee Addison, have you? As if to say 3 years.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
And he laughed his head off, and I walked out, and I thought I'd better come up with the goods.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
So even that was an accident. And the year after, I ended up at St Gregory's and coaching the Western Sydney Academy of Sport, and then the year after, St Gregory's and Penrith. So yeah, it all set up.
How did you go at St Greg's? How long did it take you to turn it around?
6 months. First training session, I said, but I had a meeting with all the players. I said, I do a load of research before I do any coaching job. I tend to take the job and do the research rather than do the research before I take the job. And one of the big things that kept coming out from St Greg's is that the players were leading things a little bit, and the coach was allowing them to lead. It's part of this whole, you must empower your players. And
yeah.
I was like, nah, they told me happy. I'm going to be bringing back in some standards. Not dictatorial standards, but, there was only going to be so many things we were going to discuss. But I also said I wanted to put a clean slate because I was sick of people telling me, both inside the school and outside the school, of which player was my first choice this, my first choice that. I was like, nah, there won't be such a thing. I said, you've all got a clean slate. If you think you can play another position, I'm coming into this with open eyes. The first session, I basically made them play. There wasn't many rules around concussion in 2010, or as many, but it wasn't full whack anyway. And it was raining, I remember, and we'd been put on the lower field to protect the top field, which was pristine. And this skinny, scrawny kid came up to me. I remember he still had pimples on his face and braces in his teeth. He said, "Sir, can I have a go at 5'8"? And I said, "What's your name?" And he told me his name. And I looked down at the list. And James Tedesco was number 22 on the list that the coach had given me the from the year before. And it was fast, could be a wing, potential fullback.
Yeah.
I said, "Of course you can have a go." And I wasn't expecting much because of the report that I just read about. And Craig Bissell, my assistant at the time, he said, "He's a good one, this kid, you watch." And he did a little bit of something, which I can't describe, with a ball. And straight away went, yep, he's the 5'8".
Yeah, okay.
And he was integral to what we did that year. We went undefeated locally, did okay in the schoolboy comp, but we won the comp that was the bread and butter. It was the first time the school had won it in so long. And the school went absolutely nuts. The boarders arrived to watch the game. We beat Blacktown, which was chock full of future NRL kids and players. Nobody expected us to. We won. They ran on the field at the end and caused all sorts.
Yeah, as you do.
So, yeah, it was just amazing. And then the second year, we went back to back for the first time in 20-odd years from when Trent Barrett and the like were there. Teddy had left, Matt Grote had left, and the team I had in my second year were not expected to do anything, and we ended up going back to back, which was unbelievable, yeah. So, it didn't take long, 6 months for the first title, and then...
That's it, wow. James Tedesco, he's champion player, fullback at the Roosters, New South Wales, Australian captain, New South Wales captain. Do you think he'll ever play 5'8" for the Roosters in his, I'm assuming, his last couple of years in NRL?
He should do, but I do, and this is where I'm going to say something now which will probably make you believe that this is probably why sometimes other NRL coaches or coaches get the shits with me. I think their coach, Trent Robinson, is actually a little bit too robotic of thought at times to see what players like Teddy and the like can bring. So I think their structure is a bit too structured.
Okay, yeah.
There are signs, and it's happened for years. Teddy, when he's just sort of thinking, I've got to just do something, or I've not got something in my head that we've been told to do. So this last play, and he does it. And the ship has probably sailed a little bit in terms of the freshness of him as a player. But yeah, it's something that should have been done a few years ago, I think, because when you play at fullback, you essentially in the modern game become a third link person or second link person anyway. So you're often making those decisions. I actually look at his ability to pass and kick and whatnot, and I would say there are times over the years when I've thought that it's not been at the same level than even when he was at school, because he had more of a free range. And I bring that back to Robbo's coaching. I feel he can be a little bit too robotic at times. And I think that's one of the reasons why everybody looks at their roster every year and go, there's going to win it. And then they finish 9th or something, or 8th or 7th, So, but that's just an opinion.
Yeah, everyone's got one.
Trent Robinson has won more NRL premierships than I have. But again, there's a caveat there. When he did win them, he had a certain James Maloney in one of them and a certain Cooper Cronk in two others that have also been perennial winners at other places. So, the jury's out.
That's it. Well, moving across to my NRL team, the Parramatta Eels, and we see Jason Riles in his first year now, the new head coach. Have you ever had anything to do with Jason? And how
don't know him. Don't know him at all. No.
From the outside then, how do you think he will go this year in his first head coaching role at the Eels?
Well, first of all, I want to say that on my own podcast and my social media channels and whatnot, I've been campaigning for years that coaches need to do more of an apprenticeship. And this guy has done an apprenticeship. So, all power to him. I do still think it's a little bit of a risk for Parramatta, though, because I would like to have seen Riles take on a Super League team and then come over. I think that's the ideal path in a way.
Okay.
I know your Fitzgibbons and your Michael Hagens in the past now went straight to NRL, but I do think that Super League has sort of morphed into the reserve grade NRL competition in some ways. I think you'll find Brad Arthur will reinvigorate his career because of what he does at Leeds and will do at Leeds. So there's still that doubt about Jason Riles for me there. However, he's done a significant apprenticeship. Some of the decisions he's making vis-a-vis recruitment and retention are worrying me somewhat, but it's clear that there's a plan in place.
Okay, yeah.
So if you want to unpack that, because a coach is only as good as the cattle that they have most of the time. And this is quite a significant roster turnaround, isn't it? From 2024 to 2025,
yeah, definitely.
It's a good quarter of the team kind of thing. So, or a third of the starting 13, really. So, if you want to unpack that, because that will make or break him.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on. You.
I was just going to say, that's what I think I like about that, is that he's come out and made these decisions and plans, and it's his job on the line, basically.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
One of the football coaches, managers that I've studied more than any, even though I'm a Manchester City fan, is Alex Ferguson, the old Manchester United coach. And to me, he's the best football coach that's ever lived. And he talks about your squad having to be a mix of fresh-faced and fearless youngsters who are still growing, old experienced heads that can help the younger ones, but a lot of players in their peak. So your biggest chunk is your players in your peak. I'm quite average with NRL players' names. I am even worse with their ages. The squad that you've got now at Parramatta, how does that fit with Alex Ferguson's assessment of what your squad should be made of?
I think we do have a little bit of experienced players there. Obviously, your Junior Palos, Bryce Cartwrights, but we did get a lot of older experienced players did depart the club as well. RCG, Gutho, Micah Sivo to an extent. Look, I think we do have the younger players in the side that fit that mould. In between, I think the prime example is Mitchell Moses. I think he's probably in his prime age, and barring injury, he's up for a massive year this year. I think. I think this is.
He'll be about 28, 29, won't he? Something like that.
Yeah, I think could even be pushing 30. I think, but I think this is his prime. This will probably define his career. I think this year.
I have massive worries about the departure of Gutho, Regan Campbell-Gillard, and Blaise Talangi. So, if you look at what Adam Reynolds leaving South did to South and the Broncos basically replaced the Souths in the top four.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
When it was that big of a shift. If you look at the ladder evolution, that's what happened.
Yeah.
When Steve Menzies retired after Manly won the 2008 Premiership, when I was there, in 2009, I don't know if you remember, but they dropped to about 7th. And one of the big reasons, I believe, and I've had this confirmed or validated by some people at the club at the time, but this wasn't the only reason, obviously, but somebody like Steve Menzies, very experienced, when you're 12-0 down and you're under the sticks because you've had a bad start, somebody like Steve Menzies can just say a few things just to calm the farm. And I think one of the big things that is being ignored too much in rugby league, because we're obsessed with sports science, we're obsessed with performance, we're obsessed with sprint times and bench press times and physical test scores. One of the most huge gaps in a lot of the decisions that are being made is we are underestimating experience. Now, I'm not saying both Gutho and Regan Campbell-Gillard probably needed to stay. I dare say as well, Blaise Talangi and those two guys, they probably take up a big amount of the salary cap. And another concept about a football team is you should probably not have too many. It shouldn't be like Manhattan where you have big building, little building with the pay. But I do think this is a very, very, very big risk from Riles, because Gutho has been replaced by a kid who's played one NRL game, and fullbacks can often get exposed more than anybody. Regan Campbell Gillard probably hasn't been truly replaced.
No.
Blaze Talangi, I think, is one of the better young kids we've seen coming through. And I know that market forces dictate things like this, but I would have rather kept him for a year rather than not. The other one that's going to shock you is Morgan Harper played as a centre under Des Hasler when they finished top 4. Now, I don't know what's changed over the last few years, but this fella's now playing in State League next year. He's obviously not a dummy, and he would be a bit more experienced. And I'm not so sure that one being shoved aside is... He's always been a bit maligned, Morgan Harper, but the reality is he's been part of a side that got to the top 4 of the NRL, and he was a regular.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not saying he's my favourite player, he isn't, but I just think there's a clear sort of, you guys are too old or we're going to move you on. And not everything in the game is about X's and O's, and not everything in the game is about sports science test scores and things like that. Sometimes it's about the grey matter in between the ears. And I would have liked them to have kept at least one of Gutho and Regan Campbell Gillard. Probably Gutho, because I think he was the heartbeat of that club. And I know Gutho, he'd have totally embraced what Jason Riles would have done. Like, he's not an arrogant player person in any way.
Yeah, no, a lot of fans have said that he was the glue that was in the Parramatta side, and he will be sorely missed. The Dragons fans, they're cheering because they've got a great player. You've had a bit to do with Gutho over the years.
Yeah, Gutho was at Manly when I was at Manly, so I do know Gutho well and speak to him quite regularly. Just, if he does something good, I'll send him a text and say, "Great work, lad, proud of you." He had his first kid recently, things like that.
Yeah.
If I need anything, he'll be there. You could argue Zach Lomax is a replacement as well for Gutho, and I do think Zach Lomax is one of the premier sort of up and coming players in the game. But I still think that even Isaiah Longy would have benefited from having Gutho around for another year.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of mentoring of playing fullback at NRL level. So yeah, I do think that one is a big risk. And Gutho, even though his legs might not be quite the same, he's just a wholehearted player.
Yeah.
When you need something, Gutho will be there, on and off the field. So,
have you been in contact with Gutho since he's been at the Dragons? And if yes, how is it down there?
Well, I'm not the kind of person who'd sort of ask that of my players. I'm not a fanboy like that, but I just want to check that they're all right or whatever. I was talking to him early November.
Okay.
And just told him I felt it was a good club that he'd joined, club on the up. And I shared a nice post about him at the time, and he was very happy and thanked me and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so, I think that St. George are probably where Parramatta want to be in a year's time, because they're going through the same thing, really, except they're a year ahead. So, but I think, if I'm honest, he would have rather have done it at Parramatta. I've not asked him that, but yeah.
How you going, mate? Are you a Paracave podcast listener?
I am, bro. It's a great podcast. Everyone tune in.
Go Para. Well, welcome back, and thank you for listening to part 1 of the interview with Lee Addison, the Rugby League Coach. I hope you really enjoyed that one. I would like to say once again, thank you for coming on, Lee. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. It was an interesting chat, especially about the Parramatta side of things as well, with Mitchell Moses, Clint Gutherson, and your thoughts on Jason Riles and how he will go this year as a coach. Certainly some good insights there as well. So, listeners, if you are interested in purchasing Lee's book called Rugby League Coach, head over to his Instagram page. All the details are there. You can do send him a message and he'll give you all the details about how to purchase that one. If indeed you would be interested in sponsoring the podcast, please send me a message on Instagram or Facebook. And if you are interested in sponsoring the podcast, you can have a podcast sponsored, a sponsored podcast that I do during the week. As I said before in the intro, I do have Assure Strata Reports, who are the sponsors for the Tipping Podcast, which will come out each and every week during the Rugby League season. They are also the sponsor of the Tipping competition, which is live now. Obviously, the season hasn't started, but you can join that competition now. Thank you to those that have joined. I really appreciate that one. It's free to enter. There are cash prizes up for grabs. So I think $175 for the first prize, $125 for second, $75 for third, and $25 for fourth. So that will be the prizes. So free to enter. Just have a look at the Paracave podcast for details or send me a message. But if you would like to have a podcast that would sponsor a sponsored podcast like that, for example, a game day preview podcast that could have your business sponsoring it, then please send me a message and we will see what we can work out. There's also a game day review podcast that will come out each and every week, so you could have naming rights to that one as well, and just general overlooking sponsorship as well. So what I mean by that is you can have your business logo in posts that I do throughout social media. I can do promotions for you for your business through this podcast and also on social media as well. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch and we will work something out, that is for sure. Thank you for listening to part number 1. Part number 2, as I said, will be out in a couple of days. I hope you really enjoyed that one as well. And moving forward, I've got a couple of more interviews already recorded that I've done throughout January, and I will bring those out, along with any breaking Parramatta news or indeed any massive NRL news as well. So stay tuned for that one. But anyway, that's the end of part number 1. Thank you very much for listening. Please share it with your family and friends. I'd really appreciate the support. And listen out or stay tuned and keep an eye out for part number 2. Thank you very much once again. Go Para!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.